أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا حبيب الله رسولي خالق
Who knows Rumi? In English, when we say to comprehend, means to understand something. But this comes from the Latin word comprendere, which means to embrace, to encompass. We cannot encompass Rumi.
In our house, they talk about Mevlana. My father, he is always reading something, and then he share with us, and he share with, especially with our mother. Oh, look what he said, and then he read it, and we hear it. He didn't say, read this, read that, but we want to read this poem. So usually we give a lesson from his poems.
Ya da Yüce Allah niçin insanı yarattı, niçin bu dünyaya gönderdi ve bu dünyada bu insanlar ne yapıyorlar? Bütün bunların gerçekten kendisine yaradana karşı görevlerini yerine getirebiliyorlar mı? Bunu işlemeye çalışmış.
Rumi said, I write poetry because that's what the people seem to need and want. He says, I would not write poetry if they could accept something better, something deeper and higher.
He was 13th century, Christian century, Islamic, first of all, theologian and student of Islamic religious sciences, born into a Sufi family. His father was a very eminent Sufi who, feeling the danger of the Mongol invasion, left what is today Afghanistan, in the old days Persia, the city of Balkh, and they came across the mainland of Persia to Mecca, made the pilgrimage, and then went north in eastern Anatolia. There was no Turkey at that time yet, as we know it. In eastern Anatolia, which was fairly well settled and relatively in peace, despite the coming of the Mongol hordes. And Rumi was, from his earliest days, interested in Sufism.
Bir anadan bir babadan doğmuş. Herkesin yapmış olduğu gibi normal okula gitmiş, eğitim almış. Daha sonra bu eğitimlerini en üst düzeyde ilerletmiş ve bugün ilahiyat profesörlüğüne eşdeğer olabilen bir müderrislik unvanı almış ve medresede öğrenciler yetiştirmeye başlamış. Dini ilimleri öğrenmiş. Hazreti Mevlana bütün bilgileri, kitaplarda yazılan bütün bilgileri zahiri olarak, dış görünüm olarak öğrenmiş ama onun içerdiği mana, o mananın manası, daha iç anlamı nedir? Onun keşfetmeye çalışmış.
Hazreti Mevlana insanı ön plana almış ve bize nasıl huzurlu olabileceğimizi, nasıl mutlu olabileceğimizi, kendimizde olanın, Allah'ın bize vermiş olduğu hediyelerin nasıl farkına varabileceğimizi anlatmış. Bunun kolaylığını göstermiş.
Rumi understood the nature of man. Okay? And through his understanding of that, Mevlana could relate through stories how man is, so that we could hear these stories and recognize ourselves in the story. The beauty of Sufism is that the Sheikh doesn't directly speak to a murid and say, you did this, that's bad, or this, no. Usually what's done is through the story, the listener realizes that, I'm that way. That's how I am. I'm lazy. I get angry. So I should, and then they connect. It's very subtle. Rumi was complete goodness, complete light. And Konya was his laboratory.
He is considered the greatest mystical poet of the Persian language, and probably of any language, certainly in the Islamic world. And he is also the most influential. He composed over 50,000 verses of poetry. And his two main works are the Masnavi, that is rhyming couplets, and it's like a Bible of spiritual knowledge and of divine love in the Persian language.
Hazreti Mevlana bize Kur'an-ı Kerim'i tefsir etmiş Mesnevi yoluyla ve onu nasıl yaşayacağımızı bize öğretmiş. O bilgileri paylaşmıştır bizimle.
The point was reached a few years ago in which the books of Rumi in poetic form sold more than the books of Shakespeare. And Rumi became the most widely sold poet of the English language. This is something unbelievable. And of course, in this process, something occurred which I think considered to be very unfortunate. And that is a kind of de-Islamization of Rumi, as if he were a kind of New Age poet.
Everything Rumi said, whether it was through poetry, through discourse, is all based on the Quran and the Hadith. Everything. Whether he tells a story about a man meeting another man, whatever it is, whatever his stories are, whatever he expounds comes from his being. His being is imbued in the Quran.
Zaten insanların karnı tok, büyük gelişmiş ülkelerde insan maddi olarak tamamen doymuş durumunda. Ama doyduktan sonra ise her istediğine ulaşabildiği için başka bir açlığının farkına varıyor bu sefer.
Gerçek açlık başlıyor.
Tabii ki. Yani ilahi ya da gönüldeki bir boşluğun farkına varıyor. O gönüldeki boşluğu farklı öğretim sistemleriyle doldurmaya çalışıyorlar.
Now, I was around in New York when all of the Swamis came. Actually, what I call the movement of spiritual energy from the east to the west that occurred at that time in the late 60s and 70s. When a lot of Swamis, a lot of Buddhist teachers came, Sufi sheikhs came. It became a sort of melting pot of spirituality. There were evenings at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York where he made a zikr with sometimes there were 2,000 people there. But the next day, those 2,000 people minus a very, very small percentage went back to live their ordinary lives saying, I had a great experience last night. Everything that you feed grows, right? If you water a plant, it will grow. If you feed an animal, it grows. If you feed your loneliness, you'll get more lonely. You have to feed your spiritual side in order for it to grow in some way. So there has to be a continuation. It's not like you can just go and have one experience and then say, okay, now I'm this, right?
Rumi founded a Sufi order called the Mawlaviya order. It became a very, very important Sufi organization throughout the Ottoman world.
1300'lü yılların başında kurulmuş ve günümüze kadar bir şekilde devam ediyor. 1925'e kadar kurumsal olarak devam etmiş ve bugün Osmanlı coğrafyası içerisinde 140'a yakın kurulan Mevlevihanede bu Mevlevilik öğretisi insanlara kamil insan olmayı, düzgün insan olmayı ya da insan gibi insan olmayı ya da insan gibi yaşamayı öğreten bir kurallar manzumesidir.
And the Mevlevi order used to go three years to like a school, like a university. And you would go into a Chile, a retreat for 1,001 days. You would learn the Quran, you would learn the Masnevi, you would learn the music, you would work in the kitchen. It was like a spiritual university. Right? now we're left with the teachings of Mevlana that we're trying to understand in a certain way within our lifestyles.
Sama, the turning, whirling dervishes, turning around, was something which Rumi received through inspiration from God.
Every Saturday evening, we are organizing Whirling Dervishes ceremony in this center. Especially every week, more than 2,000 people can join this ceremony.
I believe people need to have an experience and a shock, if you like, that moves you into another dimension, even momentarily. And I think when one has that, I won't say if, but when one has that, you begin to see some things that you looked at in one way differently. We're talking about the deepness of one's soul, the deepness of one's being, the deepness of understanding that there's a creator.